Okay, it looks like the recording has started and participants are getting into the room. So we're going to get this science pub kicked off for tonight. Um, Welcome to the Linda Loring Nature Foundation Science Pub. My name is Seth Engelborg. I'm the naturalist educator and program manager here at the Linda Loring Nature Foundation. At the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, our mission is to connect people with science and nature. We try to work with people of all ages and backgrounds. For those of you who may be joining us from places other than Nantucket, you can visit our website, which is LLNF.org, to learn about our programming in terms of research, conservation, and stewardship. And if you are on island, everybody is welcome to come out and enjoy our walking trails. Those are located at 110 Eel Point Road, and they are open to the public sun up to sundown for free year round. Just a few programming notes before we get started. Upcoming programming is as follows. On Tuesday, March 16th, as part of the Mariah Mitchell Association Science Festival, Dr. Sarah Boyce from the Linda Loring Nature Foundation will be presenting her findings from last year's BioBlitz, and will mark also the beginning of this year's 2021 BioBlitz with a demonstration on how you can get involved. Registration details for that event are coming and will be posted on our website within the next few days. After that, on Thursday, March 18th, we have the second Linda Loring Nature Foundation virtual nature trivia night. That's at 6 p.m. We had the first one in February and it was a lot of fun. If you're interested in learning more about that, go to our website, llnf.org, and you can find more info on that in the events page. And then lastly, next month's Science Pub for April will be happening on Monday, April 12th at 5 p.m. The talk is titled Effects of Climate, Habitat, and Biodiversity on Reproductive Performance in an Aerial Insectivore, the Tree Swallow in Massachusetts, and that will be with Dr. Lucy Zipf. So welcome and thank you everybody for attending our Science Pub talk. Science Pub is in its 7th season here at the Linda Loring Nature Foundation. The goal of this program is to do informal science outreach and reach our community members with talks that are casual and open to a general audience. And historically, before COVID-19, we were doing these talks at local restaurants. Most recently, they had been at Saltbox Tavern and Table for the past 2 years before we had to go virtual. So we appreciate them offering us a venue to host this type of program. And if you're on island, remember to continue to support your local establishments. But over the last year, we've transitioned to a virtual format, which has some benefits that allows us to have both speakers now and an audience from a geographic area far beyond Nantucket. So if you're joining us from elsewhere, we appreciate you tuning in as well. In terms of logistics and questions, this talk is being recorded, just so everyone knows. As an attendee, your video or audio won't be on the screen, but just know that it is being recorded. And if you like to see this talk in the future at a later date, it will be posted at some point on our website. And if you have questions during the talk, I will field those questions. You can put them either in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get to the questions at the end of Austin's talk. So with that being said, for tonight's Science Pub talk, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Austin Gallagher, who is the Chief Executive and Lead Scientist at Beneath the Waves. His talk tonight is titled Studying Shark Ecology in the Bahamas Protected Area. And with that, I will hand it over to Austin.
Great, thanks a lot, Seth. Appreciate it. Turn on my video here. I think it says you have to allow me to start my video. Is that right? Seth, can you enable me to start my
Yeah,
video?
1 second, hold on.
Great, thanks.
I think you can try now.
Okay, great. Yep, there we go. Perfect.
Thank you,
There he
thank you,
is.
Sarah.
Okay, great. And we're going to be good on the sharing too, it looks like. So, okay, perfect. We're good to go. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me here. Really pleased to speak to folks on the call tonight. A little bit about myself. Maybe came over in an email ahead of time, but I'm a Boston native. And I'm a marine biologist originally from Hanover, Massachusetts. So I spent a lot of my childhood growing up in Cape Cod, Nantucket, and the islands. And I currently live in DC right now. And like Seth said, I run a globally activated nonprofit research institute called Beneath the Waves. We focus a lot of our work on threatened species, large charismatic megafauna that swim throughout the Atlantic Ocean. And we do spend a lot of our time in the Caribbean. And I've worked with governments and lots of different stakeholders throughout the Caribbean. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some of our really exciting work in the Bahamas. Originally connected with Seth, last summer, as we do research off of Nantucket in the summers. So I've been building programs with different schools and universities up in the New England region. So it's been really exciting for me to come home and spend some time there. And I'm excited to chat tonight about some of our work in the Bahamas. And you might wonder, well, how does Bahamas sort of connect to some of the stuff up in New England area? And interestingly enough, a lot of our sharks that we've studied, not a lot, but some of the sharks we studied down in the Bahamas do actually migrate up to the New England area off of Stellwagen Bank and even Nantucket and the islands before they go back down to the Bahamas. So they definitely have figured out the snowbirding thing a lot sooner than we have. So that will kind of play into my talk a little bit later tonight in terms of how we should really be paying attention to some of these animals and what they do. So I'm going to jump back over to my slides. Hopefully everybody can see them here. So tonight or today, I'll be talking some about our work in the Bahamas and how we've studied shark ecology in this incredible marine protected area. The goal of a lot of the science that I'm involved with and that my collaborators are doing nowadays is really focused on doing the science that we need for the oceans we want. And there are a lot of people on our planet here. It is a blue planet. Its majority is water, and majority of that water is significantly dominated by ocean habitat. And a lot of the animals that are very near and dear to my heart that I've been so inspired by my whole career are indeed sharks. And these, as I will show you hopefully tonight, are really incredible animals, and they do really mind-blowing things. And it's really up to us to use that information to try and create a more sustainable relationship with our planet. When we're looking at 7.7 billion humans growing on our planet, our resources that we need are only going to increase, and trying to understand how we as a species can coexist with all these other animals is really, I think, one of the most important questions of our time. And as you'll see in some of my slides later tonight, working on sharks, these are the original Olympic athletes. They're true performers, swimming hundreds of thousands of miles per year across this incredible blue dot that we call home. So today's talk is actually going to be a happy success story, which is sometimes not the one that we hear when it relates to conservation. But I did want to just start with a slide that will help sort of put some of the success that we've been able to drive and see in context. And these are shark fins that are obviously not attached to sharks, being dried on a bamboo pole, probably in Southeast Asia. And these shark fins are dried, and oftentimes are also put and dried on roofs of buildings like this, because these shark fins can actually be very valuable. And I've been to many different Asian countries and seen firsthand the scale of harvest and exploitation of these animals, which is kind of hard to wrap your head around. I think that the loss of sharks and the overfishing of sharks is really one of the kind of greatest environmental issues of our time. Not everybody has heard about it. And it's really something that we like to bring to light, because sharks are incredibly important animals. They are top predators. This is a pair of blue sharks that a colleague of mine, actually there's 4 in the image here, but there's 2 right in the front of the shot, took off New England. So these are open ocean migrants, seasonally resident to the New England area. They are found in the tropics. My talk tonight is not really about blue sharks, but I just wanted to show this image because it shows you how big their fins are, especially their side fins, which is the pectoral fins that kind of come off the side there. And it's those fins that are really prized in Asian countries, primarily for shark fin soup, which is a delicacy that can, fetch really high values, hundreds of dollars for a bowl of this soup that doesn't really have any flavor. It's actually flavored with, it's not naturally flavored. They add beef broth and things like that to it, but it's really been a status symbol dating back to like the Ming Dynasty. And because of this, it's been estimated that sharks are really quite endangered. They're very slow growing, and it's been estimated about 100 million sharks a year are killed for their fins, and that number could actually be even larger. And to put that sort of in context is, I want to just throw this slide up there, which was a collaborative scientific paper that myself and about 120 other scientists were part of. It came out last year. And what we did is we put all of our tracking data. One of the big things that scientists do today is that we put transmitters on these animals to really find where they go and better understand what their conservation needs are. And you can chip away at that, with your own scientific research group. But when you put all these tracks together for dozens of species, 23 species here, almost 2,000 individual sharks, everything from blue sharks to whale sharks and white sharks, everything in between, all over the world, we're able to see that these animals really are transversing, the entire space of our oceans. And that's really fascinating. Why I wanted to show this is, one, to demonstrate that there's been a lot of research effort in the Atlantic Ocean for a lot of different species. Each color here represents a different species. On the Pacific Ocean, a good amount too, not as much diversity in species. There are some other places in our world where there's really been very little research done on these migratory animals, like over in Asia and other parts of the Pacific Ocean. What we were able to do with this incredible amount of data was actually overlay fishing data. So we can't track the boats with by catching them and putting satellite tags on them, but a lot of these boats have satellite tags and transmitters on them naturally. So there's this big global effort to harvest all of those several billions, if not trillions, of data points, map out all of the core areas where fishing activity is happening, and to overlay that with areas where the shark activity was. And then we're able to map out where these kind of hotspots are, where sharks and fishing boats are overlapping, to kind of give us an idea of, well, where are some of the places where these animals can have a breather from being caught? And what we found is that about, on average, globally, 25% or 1/4 of a shark's average month when it's out there swimming around is overlapped with the footprint of commercial fishing. That's pretty alarming. So that really demonstrates to us that, there are very few places where these animals have a reprieve, or a place where they can live sort of risk-free. And sometimes these animals are being caught, in a targeted way, but they're also caught incidentally as well. Other types of fisheries like tuna and sword fishing, open ocean fisheries, will often catch sharks by accident. So that's also another way that they can be harvested. So I really want to just demonstrate that these animals are really quite threatened, and they're overlapping with fishing boats. And this is why we have that number of 100 million sharks per year. And to add sort of insult to injury, in general, in the research community, our understanding of shark biology and ecology is actually quite limited. We don't know a lot about sharks, which is kind of surprising when I tell that to people, because there's a whole week of TV dedicated to these animals on Shark Week, which we love. And these are a very popular group of animals in pop culture, but they're really hard to study. And they're really hard to study because they move around so much. The ocean is a really concealing environment. And how are we going to really chip away at that if we don't have data? And that's really what I wanted to just end this part of the talk with, is how can we generate the science that we need to save sharks if they have nowhere to hide in the first place? And if we can't even find them in places because they may be rare, or we don't have the capabilities to encounter them reliably, it's almost like a double jeopardy. That's not the case everywhere in the world. And I wanted to transition to a much warmer climate that I'm very fortunate to spend a good amount of time in with my team, which is the Bahamas. This is clearly not Nantucket or the Northwest Atlantic Ocean. And there is a lot of deep water, a lot of shallow water, and there's also quite a few sharks there. And I've been doing work in the Bahamas for about a decade. And, there's a lot of amazing places to explore where there's just not been a lot of research activity in general. This is what the Bahamas looks like from a satellite image. And Bahamas literally means shallow seas in Spanish. And it gets that name because, we have all of this very shallow carbonate sand habitat, essentially, that forms these banks that have been created over, many, many millennia. And then you have also these really deep water areas. So the entire Bahamas archipelago is kind of where my mouse is encircling right now. And it represents about 700,000 square kilometers roughly of total, jurisdiction, which is pretty big for a Caribbean nation. We're really interested in creating marine protected areas right now, both my team at Beneath the Waves, but the marine conservation community in general. Right now, there's a big push for 30% protections in the next 30 years. That's a really ambitious target. And this is another research output that a group generated, and it highlighted 5 core areas that might be really critical to focusing on for achieving this target. And the Caribbean was one of them. It was the first time the Caribbean's really started to get a lot of attention because there is so much biodiversity there, lots of different species. So we really feel like we're onto something when we're talking about trying to use these Caribbean nations as a model for protected area design. There's a lot of sharks in the Bahamas, and here's why. 1993, the Bahamas banned longline fishing. That was what I was showing previously a few slides ago, where there was an overlap between shark movements and boats. A lot of those are longline boats. So there's no one going to be catching sharks by accident in the Bahamas since 1993. In 2011, the country declared itself a shark sanctuary, meaning sharks are completely protected there. You can't catch them, you can't fish them, you can't kill them, unless you have a research permit to do that, to not kill them, but to study them and tag them. And another thing that's really interesting is because of this, essentially a 30-year marine protected area, if not a little bit more, the Bahamas is regarded as the shark capital of the world. And shark diving, which you can see in this image here, is super valuable to the Bahamian economy. About $115 million per year is the value that's generated from diving. And that's people flying, staying at hotels, paying for dives, eating, etc. So sharks, like this Caribbean reef shark, are really important to not only the ecology of these reefs, but also the economy of the Bahamas. And that was really a big jumping off point for us is, well, why don't we try and do some work in an area where there's a lot of sharks and that we've seen conservation measures being very successful. And we can maybe use that as a baseline for other countries that may be interested in doing something similar. And one of the points I wanted to stress tonight was something that I really do believe is that when shark populations are healthy, they become your collaborators. And this is one of my favorite collaborators. I actually took this photo back in 2011. This is a tiger shark, and I don't know this individual shark personally. I do know some tiger sharks personally, which maybe I can tell you about later. But this is my favorite species by far. They are the white shark of the tropics. Very, very similar in size and predatory nature to the white sharks that have now kind of recolonized the Outer Cape and, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, been there for a long time, but, very, very similar in types of the predatory nature. They are literally at the top of the food chain and they move around a lot. They're incredibly adaptive, and they do actually come up to the slightly colder waters off of New England sometimes in the summer as well. So that's the point I want to make, is that protected areas are great for making sure there are lots of sharks, and then you can actually not just study the animals, but sort of work with them to help refine your research and uncover some new discoveries. Some of the things I'll talk about tonight are some of our long-term monitoring in the Bahamas that is helping to advance the science of these marine protected areas. Is it effective? Do these protected areas work? Also to highlight how by collaborating with these tiger sharks, we've identified hotspots that we didn't know were actually present beforehand. And then we're going to take a really quick deep dive into the twilight zone, which is an area of the ocean that is very, very fascinating, which we're now doing some work in. And the tiger sharks sort of guided us into that area as well. So Sharks are protected in the Bahamas, but if you want to know whether or not that protected area is working for sharks, or even to understand how do sharks make a living, what does their daily, monthly, yearly habitat use look like? Well, you can't just ask the animals that. You have to figure that out on your own, and you have to use different types of technologies to do that. This is an image of a Caribbean reef shark, which is the really popular species for dives that I had shown you on that last slide. And we do catch the sharks sometimes for some of our science, and we bring them up to the side of the boat, and we work on them very quickly, very gently to collect the data we need before we eventually release them. And what we're doing in this photo, and we've done quite a bit in some of our work, is we're inserting tags. These are called acoustic tags that we will surgically implant into the stomach cavity of these sharks. And we'll stitch the shark up. Actually, we make a very small incision, about 1 inch long, put the tag inside, suture it up. Those sutures will dissolve. And what's really incredible about this tag is that it has battery for about 10 years. And every minute or so, it will send out an acoustic signal, a ping, that has a unique identification number attached to it. So this shark is basically going to be pinging out this underwater signal for about 10 years as it swims about and goes about its life. And the underwater environment is very good for acoustics, by the way. Sound travels about 4 times faster in the ocean and water than it does in air. So we release the animal. Here's another shot of one of our team kind of working on a bigger individual. This is a tiger shark. And you can see that we're pretty safe what we do. And we've gotten it to a point where we can have the animal in the water at all times. It's very important for us because that's where they live. You know, we don't want to create any added stress. And we could sort of do all of the work, measurements, blood samples, and tagging really quickly in about 5 minutes. And after that, we'll release the shark and it will go about its way and hopefully continue to collect data for us. Now, when we release the animal, it has a tag inside of its body, like you see in this shark being released. That signal that the tag will be pinging out, it needs to be received by something. It needs to be picked up by some sort of device that's listening for that. And this device down on the bottom here, which we screw into the sand, does exactly that. This is an acoustic receiver, and it's listening for the signal on the same frequency as those tags. And every time one of those sharks swims by one of those receivers within about 600-700 feet, it will actually hear that ping and store the data. So we have these receivers strewn throughout the entire Bahamas, and we literally call it Shark Net. And we can basically be listening and detecting these animals over time. So it's a very great way of kind of piecing together what the habitat use of these animals looks like. And here are 2 of the main islands in the Bahamas. Remember this map from earlier where we work. One of these core areas is off of Nassau and New Providence, which is the capital. And then we do a lot of work down in the Exuma Keys, which is kind of like the Galapagos of the Bahamas, very remote, stunningly beautiful, less people, but same sort of shark populations between the 2 of them. So we tag sharks in these areas. We set up acoustic arrays around these islands to monitor these animals over, many, many years. And the data that we get from that can be really quite impressive in terms of really understanding what these animals do. And oops, I'll go back. This is sort of the animation, what that looks like, sort of island life for big sharks when you take all of those hundreds of thousands of data points and connect them. And what you see here is, all these kind of bridges and movements between these receivers that these sharks are doing. Now, obviously, they're not literally swimming across Nassau on the downtown streets. They don't do that, but they do. This is the way the algorithm sort of connects all that. But you can see that these animals are very mobile. They are moving constantly on an individual basis between receivers and connecting habitats, whether it's the shallow seagrass beds on the banks here. You can see some of these green dots are reef sharks. The red dots are tiger sharks. And it's just amazing for us to be able to see these animals kind of moving throughout the environments. What's been really interesting for us is to see such a stark difference in sort of lifestyle between something like a reef shark, which you see on the top here, and tiger sharks, which you see on the 2 bottom panels. And on the left side of the slide here is Nassau, and on the right-hand slide is a different region that we're tracking these sharks, which is Exuma. But the patterns between these areas are kind of very consistent for each species. And on the reef shark side, you can see that, the bigger the bubble here, which means the more sort of detections that we're getting from these animals, and the thicker the white lines, it means that those are individuals connecting the different receivers. So reef sharks in both areas seem to really kind of be more resident. They're not as wide ranging as a tiger shark. We like to call this sort of like reef sharks having their own zip code, where you might have a reef shark here that is very specific and has high residency and attachment to this area of Nassau, whereas on the other side of the island, there may be a couple different zip codes, but those animals don't really mix between the two areas. On the flip side of that is the tiger shark, which is as cosmopolitan as they get. They're very wide ranging. They connect all of the ecosystems, all of the habitats, deep sea, open ocean, coral reef. They are the nomad, and they kind of have the run of the roost in both Nassau and Exuma. So that's been really interesting for us to see that while these animals might have very complex life histories, and a big protected area will actually serve a very good purpose for protecting all those different types of lifestyles that the animals have, because there's no kind of one size fits all solution to protecting these sharks. But a very small, marine protected area in one area of an island may not be effective enough for a big tiger shark, okay? And I promised that I'd talk a little bit more about big tiger sharks because they really are my favorite. And, when we continue to do some of our data, I also told you that I would speak to individual tiger sharks that I know. And this is a tiger shark that we have named Mabel. We don't name all the sharks, but this is a shark that we've come to know really well. And we've actually tagged and released her 3 times in the same area, as you see in this photo, over the course of about 18 months. And I haven't seen her for about 1.5 years now, but she's really impressive. That also shows you that our research process is relatively benign. It doesn't harm the animals. So, and sharks can't feel pain, by the way. They don't have the nervous system capabilities for that. But this is a great shot of a seagrass bed. This is a shallow seagrass bed. Seagrass is getting a lot of attention lately in the news because it's very effective at capturing and storing carbon in the sediment. And it's been known for a while now that that's a really preferred habitat for tiger sharks in other parts of the world. And now through our monitoring, we've seen that, it's probably important as well in the Bahamas. And some of the other types of tools and technologies that we've been able to utilize to help us get some of these conclusions has involved putting cameras on the animals, sort of like the tiger sharks being the Sherpas here, and sort of carrying this device for a couple days. This tag does not stay on the animal forever. It does not go inside the animal, but it's attached to the animal with a clamp. And it is, for the most part, pretty DIY. We have a lot of different sensors that measure depth and temperature. We can be recording how fast the animal's moving, where it is in the water column, its compass bearing. And we also have a camera, as you can see in this image here. And after about 24 to 48 hours, depending on how long we program it for, this entire device will float off the animal. It will actually detach. We have a link here in the middle that dissolves with seawater. This dissolves in water, and the whole thing will come off the animal. And then we have to go retrieve it. That's the hard part. The easy part's actually putting it on the shark. The hard part can sometimes be going to find it. So we use a satellite tag and also a radio tag that we put on this kind of package, we call it. And we got to go find it. But when you do get the data, it is really like Christmas morning. And this is an image of exactly that. And you put the file into your computer and you see that, oh, here we go. Look at this new hotspot that this tiger shark has brought us to. And hopefully it's not too glitchy with the video over Zoom, but even if it is, you might get the idea here. And these tiger sharks have been really powerful collaborators, in that they've showed us that there are some habitats there we didn't really know were there before, whether it's a very vibrant coral reef or a seagrass meadow here that is really dense. That might be really important for climate change resilience. Okay, and there's another one here that I will play. In addition to those shallow water hotspots, we've also seen these tiger sharks go into new areas, really deep water, that we had no idea tiger sharks went to. Again, this is why it's so exciting for us to work in kind of collaboration with the tiger sharks, because look, people have been putting cameras on sharks and other animals, by the way, penguins, seals, birds, bears, for 30, 40 years. In fact, I think during World War II, various forces in Europe were putting cameras on pigeons to try and spy on, the enemy. But one thing that I think that is not mentioned very often is that the animals will take you to the habitats that are the most important. They naturally seek out areas, regions, ecosystems that are rich with life that might serve a really important purpose for them, whether it's eating, feeding, mating. That's what we need to figure out, is why they're going to these spots. And hopefully you're just as impressed as I was with this kind of imagery the first time I saw it, as this shark goes down into the deep trench. And you can see the wall here. This is literally the side of our planet, if you think about it, in the ocean, crust of our Earth, as this animal goes down into really deep water, 1,200 feet. What's this shark doing down there? Why do these animals go into deep water? Those little red flecks you see are just the infrared camera starting to pick up life at depth. Not a lot of light down there. So why would a tiger shark go to the deep sea? We saw from a lot of our other sharks too, by the way, that the deep sea was a place they were going to as well. We had no idea that that was the case in the Bahamas. So that was exciting for us. We also saw from other types of tags that measure depth, other types of satellite tags that we put on the animals, that these animals are going into really deep water. In fact, this is about 900 feet. So you can see this is the individual track of a shark over the course of about 2 days. And you can see this animal going down on the wall here. Imagine these kind of yo-yos up and down are just the shark sinking and then going up and down from the surface to the bottom of the ocean with pretty consistent frequency. So that's amazing. We didn't know that tiger sharks were deep sea divers really before we started some of this work. This was back from 2019, some of these data. That was very exciting for us. What that has done is actually shown us that we need to start looking at the deep sea. This is another aspect of our research that the sharks have guided us into that we would never have thought to really start looking there. Deep sea research is incredible. Everybody loves seeing videos from remotely operated vehicles and going down deep in these things and the deepest ever for this and that. But doing deep sea research is expensive. You need boats, research vessels, staff, crew that are very capable, and that can be, very logistically demanding. I've been very lucky to do some work in submarines, manned submersibles, bubble subs, they're called. I don't own one, those are expensive and they take up a lot of time. So we knew that we needed to go deep, but we didn't know how we could do it with the current technology we had. So kind of without any other options in sight, we decided to create our own. And I've been working with deep sea imaging engineer Brennan Phillips from the University of Rhode Island, in this photo on the left, to create a simple, low-cost, rapid, and easy customizable platform for capturing images of deep sea habitats. And this is exactly what this unit is on the left. This is called our deep sea drop camera. And it's pretty incredible because you can put this kind of customizable modular solution all into a Pelican case. And it has a float on it. It's got external batteries that we have to customize and wire, but it's got a GoPro camera that we have in a special deep sea housing. And we can bring these on expedition with us. And how it works is we, believe it or not, sink this entire unit over the side of the boat. If we're in an area of 2,000 feet, we can throw it off the side of the boat and it will be recording for usually 6 or 7 hours in high definition with lights. And when we want to retrieve that instrument, we actually go right back to the GPS point and we hit it with another acoustic signal. Remember, we were talking about acoustics earlier. And this device on the bottom here hears that signal and it releases a sacrificial weight that will then be living on the bottom of the seafloor forever, but we use sandbags and things like that. And then the whole device will come up to the surface in about 5 or 6 minutes. And again, now we have data, video, that has probably never been collected before, and an area of the ocean that no one has most likely ever laid eyes on. It's been really, really fascinating for us to really start thinking about, well, why is the deep sea important for sharks? If it's important for sharks, it's probably important for other animals as well. This is an image of what that looks like when you're looking at the side of the shelf, the continental shelf as it goes down. We've been able to deploy quite a few of these over the last few years and really capture, thousands at this point, thousands of hours of video data. We've done this in actually multiple countries now, Turks and Caicos, Bahamas. These 2 areas on the bottom here are specific to the Bahamas. And yes, one of those places is called the tongue of the ocean, which is a really, really fascinating place. It has sperm whales in addition to big tiger sharks. So that should tell you right there, there's probably something really important down there. We've been able to detect 87 different species with these cameras. This is a species of grouper called a misty grouper that we captured at about 600 meters in the tongue of the ocean. And it had never been known to go that deep before. So just by putting a camera down, throwing a camera, this sounds very non-scientific, but by putting cameras into these areas and letting them just record, you can make quantum leaps in our understanding of the biology of these animals and maybe actually realize that these areas are really important for conservation. Deep sea has not really been exploited yet. It's one of the only ecosystems on our planet that we have not done that to. The deep sea is our largest ecosystem on our planet in terms of just space and area. And, you know, we have a chance to get it right. So this is an example of how we can use the data and the science to catalyze or inspire policy and inspire, you know, positive success stories for our oceans. Not just the misty grouper here, but we've been able to look at 18 different depth range extensions. For the first time ever, we're seeing species go into uncharted territories. That's been pretty exciting for us. And first ever video of certain shark species, you know, that's been really, really exciting. And we think we have data for 4 new species as well. I'll try and show a little bit of this video here. There may be another video version of this online, but this is what it looks like at the bottom of the ocean on the shelf. This is not the very bottom of the ocean, but this is sort of the bottom of the shelf in some of these areas of the Bahamas. I didn't even know what a snipe eel was before we started doing some of this work. This is about 2,100 meters in the tongue of the ocean. And all of those little things that you see swimming around there, those are amphipods, which are very, very small types of crustaceans, or other floating particulate that we call marine snow. We've seen prehistoric shark species like this big eye 6-gill shark kind of swimming right by, in addition to other huge species of sharks like tiger sharks. And we just saw a silky shark kind of swim by on the video there. We had no idea these animals spent time in the deep. So we need to basically categorize this diversity in order to better protect it. And we're starting to realize that, you know, there are, I should say, pockets of life in these deep water habitats, which is, you know, pretty cool. This is a gulper shark. First time I think anyone has ever captured live video of a specimen in its natural habitat. So to conclude, the Bahamas is an amazing place because it's a relatively intact ecosystem. And, you know, for doing research and building programs and developing a nonprofit program, those can be real force multipliers. You know, we've been able to see the benefits of conservation measures. We've collaborated with these animals to identify hotspots of activity. This is a small tiger shark on the right-hand side here. But it's really been able to take our research to exciting new areas and develop a program. And it's kept things very exciting for us, by the way. And we did detect one large tiger shark that left the Bahamas in May 2019, swam all the way up to essentially Cape Cod, but about 100 miles out on the shelf on these outer seamounts, and then go back down to the Bahamas 6 months later. And then it actually repeated that entire migration. So these animals may be tropical, but they do move around quite a bit. So that being said, I just wanted to thank everybody for their time and a lot of my Bahamian partners there and our funders. And with that being said, I'll take many questions.
Thank you, Austin. That was a great talk, and I'm sure everybody on really appreciated it. We do have some questions coming in the Q&A in the chat, but just before we get started, I want to say that I had the pleasure of joining Austin on an expedition off Nantucket last summer, and it was a great experience. I have a question personally. You say that sharks are your collaborators, especially when you have marine protected areas or further your study species, but how do we potentially manage the stigma of sharks in other environments? Like up here in Nantucket and Cape Cod, we have a lot of talk about great whites being aggressive or predatory towards humans or impactful for fishing. So how do we manage some of that stigma as a community?
Great question. I mean, I think that, you know, education is everything, and we have to let science guide our decisions, not opinion. That's really, probably me sounding like I'm sitting on a soapbox talking, hopefully not in an autocratic way, but we really just need to make our decisions about how we use the ocean, how we gauge our safety based on science and not anything else. And there's a lot of science being done. So it's really just trying to work with those groups. And, I've worked in that area with a lot of those folks and try to collaborate with all those great researchers doing work up there. And, I think it's very clear that we actually don't have a lot to be worried about in terms of the stigma, because white sharks are off Cape Cod to feed on seals. And that's been that way for a long time. There have been sharks off of Nantucket, Cape Cod, and the islands long before we were there. And now that there are more people on this planet, including in all these places that we like to visit in the summer and go to our favorite beach, there is a chance, even though it's very, very small, there is a chance that we may see these incredible wildlife species that we maybe didn't see before. And by the way, the white shark population does appear to be, slowly growing in size because they've been protected for about 25 years, 26, 27 years off of both coasts of the United States. So I think that it really just comes down to education, and groups that are involved in research in those waters, in my opinion, or anywhere in the world, have a real responsibility to communicate that and to work with people from the community to get the word out, and to realize that these animals also do a lot more for us than we probably give them credit for. As top predators, they do contribute to a healthy food web. If there are sharks around, it's a sign that the ocean is probably healthy to a relative term. So,
Thank you, much appreciated. I can also independently corroborate the fact that cameras were put on pigeons during World War II. That for a while there was pretty significant research into using animals, especially birds, as sort of spy and espionage for activities like that. So it's interesting to see wildlife observations in terms of camera recordings being used for a better scientific purpose at this point.
Yeah.
So we get to the question and answers. We have a few that are similar here, but there's one from Kim Shulam. She wants to know if anyone knows what the potential long-term effects of implanting the acoustic tags in sharks may be, especially the batteries. Is there any evidence that they'll break down inside the body and potentially cause harm to the animal?
Sure, it's a great question, and it really speaks to the importance of really trying to quantify or validate any type of impacts we may have on the animals. Obviously animal welfare is incredibly important to me and my team, and we have permits and we have animal care and use protocols that we are always subject to, and in fact design ourselves. And our goal is to eventually save sharks and create healthy oceans. So we want to make sure that we are minimizing any impact we do have. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, and I really do believe in that, by the way, now that I've just mentioned that, it is important to mention the fact that these acoustic tags, shark can't hear them. So they're not on a frequency that sharks can hear. Sharks have very poor auditory capabilities. And the tag itself is housed in an epoxy coated casing. So there's no risk of the tag actually breaking down that way. Where we put it in the animal's body cavity, it's not near any important organs. It's just basically an empty, we call it the coelomic cavity of where the shark is. So the tag won't really move around a lot. It's in a pretty tight space, and it will be there for the rest of the shark's life. This tool is used widely around the world for all sorts of different types of animals, not just sharks, but fish, birds, other reptiles. And it really is, pound for pound per dollar, the best way of capturing long-term data. So it actually makes it so we may not have to ever capture that animal ever again, because we'll be tracking that animal throughout its entire life as it grows up, and we'll learn more about what it needs as it gets older. So I like to believe that the benefits of that data certainly outweigh any type of cost, but we're always making sure that we try to minimize any impact that we do have.
Great, thank you. There's another question that's related from Regina Jorgensen. She says, very interesting work. You mentioned that sharks do not feel pain. Can you elaborate on this statement? How do you know if they are feeling pain or not, especially if the nervous systems are different from mammals?
Sure. The concept of pain is directly linked to basically nerves and nervous system capabilities. And we think, based on studies in neuroscience and advances in neuroscience, that that really didn't start kind of appearing in vertebrates, which are animals that have backbones. Sharks are the oldest vertebrates, by the way. They're the first. So we really don't think that that really started until kind of reptiles, amphibians, reptiles, and obviously it's present in birds and mammals, obviously, because if I put a needle in someone's arm here, you might feel that. But we unfortunately can't ask a shark if they're feeling pain, but fish and sharks are fish, by the way, they do not have this type of receptor called a nociceptor, and a nociceptor has been demonstrated unequivocally to be directly linked to pain receptors in vertebrates. So that's where we think that that statement comes from. I will be honest that there is a bit of a debate, it's probably been running for a long time in the literature between certain scientific groups as to whether or not, there's two sides to every story. But in my opinion, if an animal does not have the type of machinery that's needed to elicit a certain response, then it probably doesn't have that. Obviously, that's not a justification for us to go out and do whatever we want. Again, sharks are really tough animals. Their mating systems, for example, are pretty brutal. They literally bite each other in order to copulate. And even just through that or other types of aggression, these animals I've seen sharks missing, fins and tops of their fins and huge gashes out of their body. I've seen a white shark with its entire side of its cheek that basically protects its gills ripped off. And then 1 year later, it was completely healed. So sharks have this sort of legendary immune system, which is kind of fascinating for how primitive they are. They've been around for about 500 million years, and they really have this sort of rough and tumble lifestyle. And because of that, they have an incredible capacity for healing.
Great, thank you. Here's another question from Emma Young. She's wondering, what do you see as the biggest threat to deep sea ecology, and how can we help lessen those threats?
Yeah, well, the greatest threat to deep sea ecology most likely is probably fishing. There hasn't been that much deep sea fishing. And when I say deep sea, I mean 600 feet plus. There have not been that many types of fisheries that have been able to go into the deep sea. There are really good sustainable fishing guides out there that we can all find. Monterey Bay Aquarium has a really good one. And there are some species of snapper and grouper that are found in deep sea that we probably want to avoid just in case, because we don't want to be contributing to that program. There's another sort of looming threat on the horizon to deep sea ecosystems called deep sea mining, which is essentially an industrial activity that will be going out and trying to literally scrape the bottom of the ocean for rare earth metals. We are now in the age of metals. We've moved on from the age of fossil fuels, and metals now power all of our devices, whether it's our electric car or our iPhone or cell phone, computers. All of our devices are powered by these rare earth metals, and there's a scarcity for a lot of these things right now. You can't get a MacBook Pro computer, or because there's a shortage of computer chips, and a lot of that production is tied to rare earth metals. Previously, a lot of them have been found in terrestrial or land-based ecosystems, and there may be movement to do that in the deep sea. So I would say that as a consumer, you can be really conscious about your choices, and whether it's a cell phone or your car or the food you eat, just trying to figure out where some of those components came from, and that will obviously help you be a more sustainable citizen of our planet.
Thank you. I haven't heard about that deep sea mining, but it's shocking to think that would happen. Here's a question from Ashley Erisman. She thanks you for sharing your research, and she's wondering if you have any information about bull shark movement in and around the Bahamas.
Sure. Yeah, bull sharks are present in the Bahamas. We've tagged and released a few. They appear to be much more of a coastal species, and there's obviously coastline in the Bahamas, but they appear to be really attached to Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, those kind of places, because there's a lot of shallow estuaries that they use for, giving birth to their young and feeding on small coastal species. So not as many. I saw another question about spinner sharks in there, and spinner sharks are definitely a warmer water species. you're going to see a lot of those sort of off Florida and South Carolina. So, we do see some of those animals kind of going back and forth between the Bahamas and the United States, but the United States is a relatively strong shark population in general, and I think that the U.S. has done a pretty good job managing its shark populations.
Great, and thank you for answering that question about the spinner sharks as well. If you have anything to elaborate there about their geographic range, like what countries they're found in or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, spinner sharks, I don't know exactly the range, but they're definitely warmer water. So I would say, at least from the Atlantic Ocean, we're going to be talking about mid-Atlantic down to Florida is sort of what that looks like. There may be some that are found in South America, but I think they're pretty small range, very similar to blacktip sharks, which are also kind of occupying the same sort of distributional range. They actually look a lot like blacktip sharks.
Great, and I've seen bull sharks in Costa Rica actually swimming up estuaries and attempting to feed on crocodiles. So I
Wow.
always thought that was an interesting ecosystem dynamic there.
Oh yeah, I love when you see top predators kind of duking it out at the top of the food chain. Pretty amazing.
I think that's most of the questions that we have so far in the question and answer in chat. If anyone else has anything, please put them in. We'll just wait a minute or so. I also want to say, I think the bit about the seagrass beds that you're researching is super important. As you probably know, in Nantucket, we have huge eelgrass beds that are a product of a lot of conservation concern, and it's a different type of seagrass than is found in the Bahamas, obviously, but we see just huge reservoirs of marine life in those areas.
Totally. Yeah, that's great.
Well, it doesn't really look like anyone else has any questions, so I guess we'll wrap it up. Oh wait, one may have. Yeah, not important. I guess we'll wrap it up. I want to give a thank you to Dr. Gallagher of Beneath the Waves. It was a pleasure to hear your talk and learn more about the work you do. I know that you've been active in other outreach activities, and if people are interested in learning more about Beneath the Waves, I'm sure they can find information on your guys' website. And if there's anything else you want to add before we wrap it up, please do.
No, I think that's it. Just want to say thank you very much. Real pleasure to give this talk. And if anybody wants to join for a day of research in the summer off of Nantucket or the islands next summer, please feel free to reach out to the folks here, and you can get my contact information, and be really happy to connect with anybody that way, or through my website.
We have tons of thank yous pouring in, so we really appreciate you being able to talk, and everyone who's a panelist or an attendee, sorry, thank you for joining on. And it's a great offer to have the ability for people to see your research firsthand. And I know that in the meantime, in the cold months when there might be less activities, there might be one or two Shark Week shows that you've been featured on that they could watch when they get a chance.
Yep. We'll be on a couple of those again this summer. So, but it's always fun to actually experience Shark Week in person. So again, if anybody wants to come out with us, feel free to just send an email, austin@beneaththewaves.org, and we'll try to figure something out.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated, and hope you have a good rest of your night.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Austin.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Seth.
Yeah, no problem. We can probably stop the recording.